Hey guys, my name is Kira Hill, owner of Vino Culture, a wine education company and certified sommelier. For this episode of my wine education videos, I'm going to be discussing something that is asked to me in every single event I think I have ever hosted, and that is about decanting wine. When to do it, how do you know if you should do it, how to do it correctly, and why does it even matter? So if you've ever wondered that, we are going to be discussing that today. First of all, I want to get into the actual decanter. Does it matter the size, the shape? And pretty much my answer is no. You can spend a whole lot of money on really fancy decanters, and no one ever uses them because they're impossible to clean, and they get stained because they're impossible to clean, and then you spend lots more money on other gimmicks to clean the fancy decanters. So I recommend anything that just has a simple shape that is easy enough to clean. This is a Riedel decanter, and it's perfectly sized to fit in the dishwasher or to be able to travel around, and it's awesome, so really easy to clean. So it doesn't have to be this size, doesn't have to be this shape. Just get something that allows an entire bottle of wine to get into the vessel, whether it's a flower vase or a coffee pot. Just make sure it's very, very clean, doesn't have any dust or wine or water in it from washing right beforehand. So that's about the decanter. Now, when to decant, and I'm going to go over 3 different reasons that we decant our wine. One is if it's a pretty cheap bottle. So if you're trying to get that sulfur smell to blow off of the wine, you know, someone brings you a bottle at a party and it's not necessarily the wine you would drink, but you are going to serve it a quick decant, meaning just pour it in the decanter and get ready to go. That's going to be perfect to blow off that sulfury smell, that cabbagey, that burnt match smell that is often found on like the first whiffs of some cheaper bottles of wine. So it won't necessarily make the wine taste like it's a $500 bottle of wine, but it helps get rid of some of that not so pleasant smell on the first sip of the wine. Next reason you decant your wine is if it's an older bottle. So as wine ages, sediment develops in the bottle, throughout the bottle, and that's literally tannins, these polymers that form these long chains, and then they, instead of being suspended in the wine, they're going to form those chains and they get really heavy, and so they sink to the bottom. They absorb the pigment of the wine and thus becoming sediment in your wine. There are young wines that have sediment too, and that's just because the wine was unfiltered, but old wine has sediment in it. So we don't want that grit, that grime in our wine necessarily. So decanting the wine, meaning pouring the wine, the liquid, from the bottle to the decanter, but leaving that last ounce or so in the bottle, helps remove the sediment from the liquid that we want to drink. That's really only possible if the wine, after it's been stored on its side, of course, if it's been upright for at least 24 hours, allowing all that sediment to sink to the bottom of the glass. If the bottle's been moving around a whole lot, the sediment's mixed in throughout all the wine, and so pouring it into a decanter isn't going to remove the wine from the sediment. So if you are decanting an old wine, just make sure that the bottle that you want to serve is upright for at least 24 hours to allow that sediment to sink to the bottom. Always cellar your wine on its side, but about a day before you want to serve it, stand it upright if it's an older bottle of wine. The third and most popular reason to decant a wine is just because the wine is big, it's robust, it's triangular, it's not necessarily smooth and elegant. And that's because young tannins, that drying sensation in the front of our mouth, young tannins are pretty aggressive. They suck out the moisture from your mouth. The tannins come from the skin of the grape, the seeds, and the oak that the wine was aged in. So over time, tannins soften, and that's because as they link up, there's less surface area of each polymer, of each tannin polymer, to interact with your mouth, and so less of that drying, aggressively drying sensation as they link up and form chains. Each one individually will have more surface area if they're suspended throughout the wine. But as the wine ages, then they form up those links. So tannins soften with age, They also soften with excess oxygen. So that's what decanting is for the third and most popular way we decant wine, and that's just introducing oxygen very quickly into the wine to soften the wine, and also allowing some of that alcohol to evaporate and release those aromatics and make the wine bloom or develop or open up or whatever adjective or verb you want to use. So I'm going to demonstrate how to decant a bottle of wine. I'm going to use Olivier and L'Enfant Gigondas. This is a Grenache-based blend from the Southern Rhone. And first and foremost, we are going to sip the wine because you should never, ever, ever just open the wine and decant immediately. First of all, if you go through 3 hours of decanting and the bottle was corked and you didn't know because you didn't taste the wine at first, then you've just wasted 3 hours of your life and you could have been decanting another bottle to drink. We don't want that to happen. So always, 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 as soon as you open the bottle, pour yourself just an ounce or so. That's all that's necessary. Make sure it smells good. Make sure it's not faulty, it's not cooked, it's not corked. There's nothing wrong with the wine. Then you're going to taste it, and basically what we're looking for is if it's flat, as in like not much is going on, the wine hasn't developed at all, then decanting could help with that. If it's aggressively triangular as you're sipping it, if when you drink it, it feels like you're drinking triangles, it's just rough around the edges and hard to get down, then decanting will soften those edges, turn those triangles into figure eights. So those are the two ways that decanting a young wine could help the taste profile. But some of that is up to preference. So say I really enjoy the triangular, kind of rustic, rough around the edges wine, then I might actually enjoy my wine not decanted. I personally prefer smoother, softer wines that have developed more so they have a little bit more conversation with you. And decanting helps with that. So I like to decant, quite frankly, most of my red wines, even some white wines, and even some champagnes. Believe it or not, that is a real thing that people do. So, tasting this wine. Yeah, it is, the tannins are there. They're super apparent, drying out my mouth pretty intensely. I think the fruit's there, but it hasn't fully developed yet. It hasn't come out yet because the wine is just not open yet. There's a lot more that this bottle has to say that I think will say with some time and with some oxygen and infusion. So that's what we're gonna do today. So take your bottle and you take your decanter and you're gonna both at a 45-degree angle pour the wine into the decanter. You want to do this gently, never touch the bottle of wine to the decanter lip. The reason why is if you chip that decanter with the bottle, that glass is going to go into the decanter with all of your wine. You won't know where it is, and then you've just lost the whole bottle. So we don't want to do that, so always keep a good distance between the bottle of wine and the decanter. So that is one just elegant way to do this. I know that this wine doesn't have sediment, and it's not an older wine, so I didn't have to leave that last ounce in the bottle. But if I did, right about that last ounce, then I'm just going to stop pouring and leaving just an ounce of wine in the bottle, capturing all the rest of that sediment. Again, if it's an older wine or an unfiltered wine. So now we have the liquid in here, and it's just about oxygen infusion. So this would be just a single decant and a soft decant. So if I just want to let this hang out here for an hour, it will continue to develop. If I don't have an hour, let's say I just got home from work and I need a glass of wine right now, I'm sure we've all been there before, then you can introduce more oxygen into the wine just by swirling the decanter. So I'm allowing more of the wine to open up and develop with oxygen infusion by swirling the wine here. That will allow faster infusion of oxygen into the wine so you don't have to wait quite as long. I think it's romantic to wait 3 hours as your wine decants and slowly develops. Sometimes I just don't have the time though. So feel free to swirl around. The other thing you can do, especially if the bottle doesn't have any sediment in it, you can do what's called a double decant, where I'm going to pour the bottle of wine from the decanter back into the bottle. and that's called a double decant, and then maybe back and forth again. You can use a funnel for this to make it easier to pour back into the bottle, or you can use a second decanter and go back and forth. They also have these fancy double decanters that you can buy that makes this really easy. I've practiced this a lot on very expensive white carpets so that I can be able to do this. Also, it was always really helpful to get that extra tip when I was serving at restaurants. Doing that double decant into the bottle table side was always a fun little sommelier trick that I like to do. So that's back, and then we're going to go back into the bottle. Now let's say I'm really pressed for time and I don't have the time or patience to go back and forth between the bottle and the decanter. And I know that this wine doesn't have lots of sediment, so I'm just trying to get a quick infusion. So instead of this elegant, gentle pour, I'm actually just going to be pretty aggressive with the way I pour the bottle into the decanter. Can only do this again if you know that your wine kind of needs that much oxygen. Some wines only need a single decant and then they've already opened up enough, but this wine I could tell just needs that big infusion of oxygen. So this is not something I'd recommend doing tableside if you're in the industry. It's not necessarily an elegant way to decant your wine, but it's a fast way to get a lot of oxygen into it. So just pouring straight upside down, the more glugs you hear, the more oxygen is being infused into the wine. So again, do this at home. Only do it if you know your wine kind of needs that much oxygen to open up. Never do this by doing it tableside if you're a server or a bartender, unless you really know the guest and know that they are going to be okay with that with the wine. So after that, I'm gonna swirl again. Now I'm going to taste it to see if it's opened up enough to have that glass of wine. Let's see. So that's still that initial pour, and even though it's been sitting in the glass for a few minutes, it's still pretty intense. So along the way, in terms of decanting, I recommend tasting your wine to see if it has changed, if it's developed, because once you put oxygen into a wine, you cannot take it out. So there's a point in which you've gone too far. So the Molly Duker shake, where you just pour out a half a glass of wine, put the cork back in it, and shake up the bottle. Putting it in a blender, using an aerator like a Venturi or any other device. All of that infuses loads of oxygen into all of your wine very, very quickly. And if it's too much and then the wine starts to kind of peter out, then you've lost the structure and integrity of the wine. So taste along the way to make sure you're not doing it too much. And remember that unless you're pouring out lots of people, the wine is still going to develop in the bottle or the decanter as you're drinking it. So getting it optimal right away means that by the third glass, it might not be as optimal. So just be careful to not infuse too much oxygen too fast into the wine. So already the nose is a lot more developed, a lot more of that fruit forwardness, red fruits, a lot more floral notes, a lot more herbaceous notes on this too. It's a really gorgeous smell. Initially it was all just rustic, earthy, leathery, smoky, spicy, but none of the feminine qualities of the wine were shining. Yeah, loads different. Tannins are still there, of course. They're not going to go away. They're a little bit more integrated into the wine. The fruit has come out. Wine is softened up, and it's become a lot more elegant and a lot more, sultry instead of so aggressive. So gorgeous wine. Look for this. If you can't find Olivier Lafont Gigondas, look for any Gigondas. Gigondas is a village in the southern Rhone Valley. Focuses on Grenache-based blends, often blended with Syrah, Mourvedre, and can be anywhere from fresh and fruity to really intense and masculine. Gorgeous wines, especially if you like Chateauneuf de Pape but don't want to spend, $40, $50 on a bottle. Gigondas offers some great values. So, yes, I love it. So that's decanting. Ask any question in the comments below if there's a question you've been dying to have answered for you and would like me to explain it, and be happy to do so in this series that I'll call the Frequently Asked Questions. Look forward to seeing you next time. Until I see you again, cheers.